Thank you each and everyone for being here tonight, both here in the Zendo and also in the cloud. It's always a joy to be here and a great honor to be invited to speak to you. As Valerie said, today is a very special sun because it's our son Benjamin's 33rd birthday. But it's the birthday of the Bodhisattva of Guanyin, which is celebrated in the Chinese tradition. So the Bodhisattva of great compassion. And it's very interesting because in the Song dynasty, there was this story about this bodhisattva as being born as Princess Miao Shan. So she was the youngest daughter of a prince and of a king. And of course, he wanted her to get married and carry on the kingdom. And she refused. She wanted to become a nun and practice the spiritual path. And the father was very upset about this and sent her into the strictest monastery and said, give her a really hard time that she forgets this idea. But she would not relent. And so then the father was so angry that he burned down the entire monastery. And this is how Miao Shan, as it says, went to the underworld and saw the suffering in the underworld. And then she came back and became a mountain hermit, meditating on the mountain. In the meanwhile, many years later, the father had gotten very sick, very ill. And a wise man came to him and said, the only way that you can be saved is by the eyes and the arms of a hermit who lives on top of the mountain. It's a very sacred person. And so the king didn't think that the hermit would agree to this, but he went and asked anyway. And it was his daughter. And she immediately took out her eyes and donated the arms. And then she appeared in the form of the 1,000-armed bodhisattva of great compassion. And actually, that bodhisattva was was my PhD dissertation, that textual tradition and cult in China of the bodhisattva of great compassion with 1,000 arms and eyes. And so I'm quite happy that I have a son, Benjamin, who is born on this day, who is 33 years old today. And just allow me a short story about Benjamin. When he was 16 years old, I took him to India to a meeting of the Elijah Interfaith Institute. And the Dalai Lama was present also. And when we got to India, Benjamin got sick with diarrhea, like many people do. And so he was lying on the bed like Vimalakirti. And all these religious leaders who were in attendance, they came to see him and to bless him one after the other. And at the end, he said something very interesting. A school magazine, when he came back to Dallas, asked him about the experience. And he said, well, there are three things I want to say. First of all, I did not know that religious leaders of the different traditions get along so well. Second, I did not know that they would take me, a young boy, so seriously, that they would be so kind to me. And the third thing he said is the Dalai Lama was there with bodyguards. And Benjamin said, I think the Dalai Lama is very lonely. He's always surrounded by people who want to take his pictures because he is famous. And then his bodyguards, you can't really get close to him. So when I grow up, I don't want to be like the Dalai Lama. And so now he's a child therapist. So that's the story about Benjamin. But now I want to tell you, I disappeared again, about the next, or not the next, but one of the Elijah conferences that I attended last year in December in Oxford, which is the inspiration for my talk tonight. And the conference was on the very up topic, the human person, religious ideas, and contemporary challenges. And the challenges we discussed were the erosion of community and shared values, the challenge of individualism and polarization. Then the impact of technology on human identity, the challenges of AI, biotechnology, and digital life, a lot. And then C, of course, the climate and the ecological crisis. And so we experience all of these challenges every day in our own lives and on a global scale. And don't they often make our spirit feel downcast and our hearts discouraged? And if so, could it be that the story in the Hebrew Bible about Adam eating from the tree of knowledge without connecting it to the tree of life? Could that be a hint about the roots of our problems? Anyway, this is the hint I received from Rabbi Art Green, who is a scholar of Jewish mystical and one of the of the members of the Elijah Interfaith Institute and a good friend. And he was speaking about that when we discussed the challenges of AI and the impact of technology and digital life on our human identity. So let's repeat this again. I said, eating from the tree of knowledge without connecting it to the tree of life. So, what does this tree of life stand for? As many of you probably know, this tree of life actually is a quite popular motif here in New Mexican art. I found a weaving of it, which I brought home to our house, and it shows a tree that reaches towards the heaven, and on its branches there are these beautiful trees. There are these beautiful birds, and around the air, flying, there are also all kinds of beautiful birds, and each of them is very individual in a different color, resting on the branches or flying, filling the air. And it's so beautiful. So many people who come to our house and visit for the first time, they look at this thing and say, that is so beautiful. So this biblical tree of life actually stands for that infinite light, beauty, and wisdom of the divine life, or if you prefer, of the life of the essential world in each and every bird, in each of every being, in each and every one of you. If we could clearly see that, would it not transform our worry and then fill our heart with joy, peace, love? But then, how can we see that? And this is where our Zen practice comes in. So Huineng or Enno, the sixth ancestor, said that Zen is enlightening our heart, mind, and seeing its true nature. So this heart, mind, kokoro in Japanese, that is the heart and the core of each thing. And so what is the nature of this heart, this mind? It's one word, shin in Chinese, kokoro in Japanese. It's clear and empty like a mirror, vast and void, which means there are no hindrances, there are no barriers whatsoever. So this is the core of everything, the nature of everything, of the whole universe. But now, can we honestly say that our own heart and mind is like that? Clear and transparent, luminous, empty and infinite? So my teacher in Taiwan, Shifu, always speaks about these two qualities, clarity and emptiness, and that we have to experience that. He says, otherwise, your gaze will not be as unimpeded, as free as that of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which is the Sanskrit name for Guanyin or Kanzisai. And actually, it means the gaze is unimpeded or free, Kanzisai Bosatsu. And he says, if your gaze is not at free, your love and your compassion will also not be as unconditional, not as all-embracing as the one of the Bodhisattva Guanyin. So then, how do we do that? A clear, transparent heart, mind, and infinite compassion? So we know it, of course, from our practice. It's taking this posture that is conducive to stilling our monkey mind and paying attention to each breath, letting go of all these thoughts and worries and notions in our mind, not holding on to them, And then diving deeply into that stillness, really, that stillness that is beyond sound and silence. I think all of us have heard time and again that Zen is no thinking, not thinking. That's hard to do, right? But why is it so emphasized? Why is that so crucial? So, to come back to this story of Adam eating from the tree of knowledge, does it not point out precisely what happens when we don't connect knowledge, thinking, judging, discriminating, splitting subject and object, inside and outside, you and me, us and them? And we don't connect this knowing to not knowing, namely to this world beyond knowledge, beyond boundaries, beyond all these opinions and certainties, to this world of wide openness, of the mystery, of the ineffable, the infinite, the sacred, all these words. It is that world that can never be expressed by any of our words or concepts. This world of nothing, no thing there at all. And at the same time, it's the world of just this very moment. The sound of my voice, the flower, the candle, the Buddha, trees outside, sitting down, getting up. It's one and the same. So, our own life and the life of the world, with all of its many challenges, with all of that suffering, conflict, destruction, it really teaches us. It shows us what happens when we are not able to connect knowledge to life, namely to that which is always beyond knowledge, right here, right now, fully alive. But now, which koan comes to mind on the topic of tree of life? So, how about Joshu's oak tree in the garden? And so, I would like to take a look at it here. But I think in this context, actually, we first have to see Joshu's koan mu, which really acts like a bombshell in connection with knowledge, because it breaks through completely through of all of our thought constructs. I think you're all familiar with that. Of course, it's the first koan that's usually given in the Sambo Zen tradition to work with. And it goes as follows. A monk comes to Joshu and asks him in all earnestness, does the dog have Buddha nature? And Joshu answers, mu. So, on which level is this monk actually asking that question? It says, in all earnestness. So there is this really heartfelt, deep doubt about the teaching of the Lotus Sutra that says that all beings without exception have the Buddha nature. But could that apply to a dog as well? You know, in China, dogs were considered rather dirty. They are not usually pets or best friends or family members like with us in the West. But so this question, as earnest as it is, it's still asked on the level of the intellectual discriminating mind, right? There is the dog, there is the monk, and there is the concept of Buddha nature. So how do they all fit together? And Joshu's answer is simply, or wu, he would say in Chinese. And it cuts right through to everything. It cuts through the monk, the dog, the Buddha nature. So in Chinese, this mu, wu, means no, don't. Thing. It just cuts through. But then the question is, what is mu? So throw yourself into mu, let it ripen, let it take all the boundaries of your intellectual or knowledge out and widen it. Let it sweep all notions away with this big broom and let you help experience life as it truly is. Yourself, the monk, the dog, the tree. Just this ordinary life, just as it shows itself. And there's actually nothing that is dirty like the dog or holy like the Buddha nature. And this amazing thing in the practice with Mu is that losing everything, more, 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 you wipe it away. You gain everything. Losing your life, you really gain it for the first time. And I think actually that each and every one of you has had some or more initial Mu experiences in which your worries or previously held assumptions just drop away to open up completely new horizons. Experiences that come with a sense of wonder, gratitude, or inner peace, maybe joy. In other words, you have really started connecting to the tree of life. So let you give me a few examples from my own life. Actually, I first encountered the Bodhisattva Guanyin, a white-seated Madonna figure, it looked like to me, on the altar of Shifu, my teacher's hermitage in Taiwan. And when he put down the flowers and the candles that I brought and lighted some incense in front of this figure, I asked in all innocence, Shifu, I thought that in Zen Buddhism, you don't worship idols. And he looked at me with this wide smile and he said, that is not an idol, that is you. What did he mean? What did he see? Anyway, my notion of idol totally swept away. Or sometime later, when I did my first session under Jesuit Father Inomia Lassalle in Germany, really not knowing anything about session at all, I asked him just as earnestly as Joshu's monk, Father Lassalle, well, wouldn't Jesus mind if I practice Buddhist meditation? And guess what he answered? He said, you know what? I wouldn't worry about it. And as I fully trusted him, I just stopped worrying about it. And we don't know if Joshu's monk actually stopped worrying about the question whether a dog has the Buddha nature or not. But if you trust the teacher and you fully throw yourself into your practice, these kinds of theoretical questions, they really resolve themselves. And let me give you one last example. So more than 20 years ago, I brought my friend Peter, who was a Buddhist practitioner with a deep devotion to the Virgin Mary, on a pilgrimage to Lourdes in the south of France. Peter was suffering from terminal colon cancer at age 44. And he wanted to dunk in those healing waters there in the spring. So while he was taken down to the water by the volunteers, I joined the service in the grotto, a mass in the grotto, where Saint Bernadette had uncovered that healing spring. And on that day, the chapel was filled, probably like every other day, with human suffering on every bench, everywhere you looked. So right next to me, I remember there was a mother who had two severely disabled children. And I really felt anguish in my heart and I cried out, how can all these people be held in myself? And the answer came very clearly. Don't let this be your worry. And with that, my heart very amazingly was completely at rest, at peace. And in the evening, we joined the singing together. There was a candle procession with hundreds of people in wheelchairs with crutches. And they sang together. And this whole atmosphere was filled with beauty, with gratitude. You could even say with joy. It was really so palpable. It was just an ocean of lights. So the tree of life in all of that suffering, or you could say the tree of life of all that suffering. Don't let this be your worry. I don't know if some of you probably were here for the talk that Shanna gave 2 or 3 weeks ago. And she always emphasized this already saved. And so this is what I could feel. It's beyond any concept you could have, but you feel clearly already safe. And Peter himself, he had been so full of energy that we climbed a high mountain the next day. But then he died less than a month later in complete peace. So let us finally look at Joshu's oak tree in the garden. It's case number 37 in the Mumonkan, the gateless gate. So the monk here is asking Joshu, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? And Joshu says, the oak tree in the garden. So this monk is also asking about the essence of Buddhism, the essence of Buddhism. What is Bodhidharma's teaching? Why did he come? What's this Buddhism? What is enlightenment all about? What is it? What is it all about? The oak tree in the garden. Just that. I call it the oak tree of life. Just one tree. That's the whole essence of Buddhism, the whole life of the universe, the whole fact. Can you see that? So there is a tiny seed, right? It's not coming from itself, it's coming from some oak tree parents. It's nourished by the earth, the sun, the clouds, the wind, the rain. Perhaps it's taken care by a gardener or sprinkler system in a hot place like Texas, for example. And it stretches its entire being towards the light, the sky, firmly rooted in the earth, like we are when we do our practice. So then how about the branches? As I told you about the oak tree of life or the tree of life, there are birds that are nesting in its branches. And that's what the birds also did in Texas. We had an oak tree, a live oak tree behind our house. And the birds had their nests in there and were resting in the shadow. And there was even a whole family of squirrels. So this oak tree, of course, was shielding everyone from the hot Texas sun. And you look at this oak tree with its roots, the trunk, the branches, all the twigs and leaves, giving life, giving us air to breathe, sheltering numerous life forms. What does it remind you of? Is it not the Bodhisattva with 1,000 arms and eyes? Can you see that? In this tree, there is no awareness whatsoever of an I, me, mine, but pure, simple beauty, one with the universe, the whole universe, and selfless giving, dana, until the end. Now, is that not the true self, our own true self that the monk was asking about? Is it you? So Dogen said, when you forget yourself, you realize yourself in all things. Or Valerie spoke about Dongshan and his realization. I think she said, there is no self. I see my true face everywhere. In other words, we are never separate. We belong to this universe, to each other. We are one existence, that amazingly so. And so that realization is the one that gives us true joy, like the one that I experienced in that candle procession of all the sick and dying people in Lourdes. So that kind of realization really has nothing whatsoever to do with knowledge. It has everything to do with that heartbreaking beauty of the tree of life. So I want to finish my talk with a story of an Indian Bodhisattva canon, Guanin, which I found in the New York Times obituary on February 8. Not sure if anyone of you saw that. Her name is Salumarada Timaka, and she was called mother to thousands of trees, and she died at age 113. So her name, Salumarada, means literally a row of trees. So Salumarada planted trees for over 70 years, starting in 1948 as an act of consolation in her extreme sorrow because she couldn't have children. And therefore, she was stigmatized in her community so much that she contemplated committing suicide. But then she and her husband, Bikalu, they were both illiterate, impoverished farmers, transformed their despair into an act of creation. Bikalu discovered some roots of or saplings of banyan trees, and they decided to plant these banyan trees on a 2.5-mile stretch of road to the village, protecting them from the cattle by putting around fences and then going there every morning to water them, with the water container on their heads, going to water the trees and make them grow. And those trees, it says in the newspaper, they are now a green canopy shielding all the villagers going back and forth. And later, Salu Madara said, "It was my fate not to have children, and so we treated our trees as children." And they continued planting trees. So after her husband's death in 1994, she received attention from a local politician and then even some international newspapers, which helped her to plant many more trees. And she was named the Environment Ambassador of Karnataka, which is a province in the southwest of India, in 2022. And also invited to speak at numerous functions, also in schools, even though she was illiterate and she had never been to any school herself. And in the end, she gave so many talks that she was on the road for 200 days a year. And she asked everyone to do one thing. Please, in your whole life, try to plant 10 things. That's all. I saw that there is a documentary on her, and it's called Salumarada Tikka, the Green Crusader. And in that documentary, the school children sing, "Trees find shelter under Salumarada Timaka. The wind catches its breath under Salumarada Timaka." And she tells the children in turn, "Every tree I plant is my child. I am alive in every one of them." So I want to conclude by saying that let our Zen practice transform us into a tree of life for others, so that they can catch their breath as well, that they can find shelter and be nurtured by our compassionate care. So thank you on this day of Guanyin, with deep gratitude to our practice and to all of our teachers here. Yamada Konwoshi came to mind a lot today to me, as well as my teacher, Father Enomia Lassalle, my husband Ruben, who is now in the Philippines, and here, these wonderful teachers and friends, everyone here. And thank you to the Tree of Life.